So we have finally arrived at my definitive Resident Evil tier list. It's taken a long time to get to this point, so I want to say first off, thank you ever so much for your support of the channel. It's been insane to me how much we've grown ever since I did my first Resident Evil review, which was Code Veronica, back over, 14, 15 odd months ago now. It's been a wild ride, and there's been some ups and downs. There's been some games which have definitely not hit the way they should have, and others which have been surprising, and I've really enjoyed them. Now, 10 months ago, I finished the Mainline series, and I put up a tier list ranking on that. So, to save your time, instead of going through every single entry again, I might as well pick up where I left off that tier list. We'll have a look then to see if any of my opinions have changed from where it was 10 months ago, and then we'll add on all the entries I've done since, which are all the spin-off entries, as well as Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2 OG. So let's dive in. Okay, so here we are. This is where we left it. So we had Resident Evil Remake right at the top of the charts, and Resident Evil 6 right at the bottom. Okay, so first thoughts looking at this. Do you know, I'm still pretty happy about it. There's a couple of sticking points that I think I do need to resolve a little bit. First off, the more time that I've had away from Village, the more I'm thinking that 7's a better game. It was a really tricky point when I was doing my tier list last, in that I couldn't really distinguish which one I preferred more, because Village does everything I like from Resident Evil 4 and then combines that with puzzle elements and some really good exploration. But 7's just so good. I love the item box inclusion. I love how it's just such a throwback to classic Resident Evil. And I do enjoy the kind of action-heavy roots that Village has, and the spectacle that you get with that. But I kind of gotta go. I gotta go with what I prefer out of the series. 7's just an absolutely phenomenal game, and to me, the Marguerite boss fight is still my favourite boss fight in the entire series. I love it so much. And when I think of the two, 7 to me is more memorable than 8. I think that 8 drops the ball on Castle Dimitrescu. I don't think it has the same weight that it really should. It's over way too fast. The kind of stalker elements that Lady Dimitrescu has herself don't really come to full fruition. And so far, we still haven't had the DLC. So the Duke's just this kind of sitting plot point that's just never been resolved. I don't know what his whole purpose is. I don't know why he's even bothered to help you out and save you at the end. I don't know. And I'm still no wiser to it. Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Do you know what? I'm going to leave it like that for now. The rest of it I'm pretty happy with, to be honest. Looking over this list really quick, we've got Resident Evil 4. I think that's in the right place. It is a great game. As I said in my review, it's a great game, but it's just not what I look for in Resident Evil. But it is way better than 5 and 6, without a question. Without a doubt. Now, I do want to come at this as well, because the thing that surprised me is that ever since I put my Resident Evil 6 review out, I had no idea that people were so passionate about that game. I constantly get messages and comments from people saying how much they love 6. And I had no idea that was even remotely the case. I thought there'd be some people that like it, yeah, sure. But to the level that it is, has been really shocking. Been really surprising, actually. And I gotta say, you'll be quite glad with this, because by the time we're done, 6 is nowhere near going to be the worst entry on this list. That is for damn sure, because we've got some stinkers to go through. Now, I think the best way of us actually organising this is doing it in the order that I put them up, which I actually did in their order of release. So I think that's probably the best thing. The two we'll save to the end will be Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2. They're my most recent ones that I've reviewed on the channel. So let's dive in. Let's start off with Resident Evil Survivor. Oh boy, where do we start with this? So, Resident Evil Survivor is a bit of a tricky one, because when I played it at the time, I hated it. I thought it was tragic, really, in how it actually plays. The story is good, quite dark, but it's just that typical story of somebody who just forgets everything, you know, just total amnesia, and then just bumbles their way through an adventure, and then finds out, actually, do you know what, I don't kill kids. I'm a normal guy. I was really negative on this game when I played it. I found a couple of things that I did like, and I thought it controlled quite well, even though there isn't a reload button. But you know what, it's not that bad. Especially when we come on to some of the other entries that I've played. It's not that bad at all. Is it worse than 6? Yeah. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a change here already. And we're going to be changing this as we go. I'm going to bump 6 up to there. 6 up to there. Because it's not a step down from 5. It is worse than 5. But it's not like an actual tier down, I don't think. And the gap there between 4 and 5, yeah, I think that's about right. A tier in the middle difference. But this is kind of like the meh. You know, from C down, it's like meh. You know, where I'll play it if there's kind of nothing else there, or if I was desperate, you know. But as soon as we get to E, and we might even need another tier below this, it's getting bad. But yeah, closing thoughts on Resident Evil Survivor, not as bad as I originally thought it was, because it gets much worse. And speaking of much worse, Jesus Christ, Survivor 2 is an act against God. It's one of the worst video games I've ever played. It's terrible. There's hardly any redeeming factors about it whatsoever. It butchers the story of Code Veronica. It randomly chucks in Nemesis just for shits and gigs. Why? Dunno. He just appears. He's just there. And it's all a dream. Totally pointless. Totally pointless game. Plays really bad. Nothing really fun about it whatsoever. And it goes against what Resident Evil is. And sure, you can say, oh, it's an arcade game. But we got arcade games or arcade light games coming up. And they did it so much better than this. No, it's a shocker. Honestly, just do not play it. It's terrible. It's absolutely shite. Nothing more to say about it. It's a stinker. Resident Evil Gaiden.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Do you know, anyone who's watched my channel before will know that when we get to the end of a series, I get you guys to vote on what you want to see next. And the spin-off entries for Resident Evil won by an absolute landslide. And I am glad that you guys voted for them. But Jesus Christ, after playing Survivor, Survivor 2, and Gaiden back to back, I thought I was going to end it all. I honestly thought it was time for me just to pull out a shotgun and just literally just eat the end of the barrel. Because this game is literally the worst entry by an absolute landslide. It is one of the worst games I've ever played. And it made Survivor 2 look decent. It's shocking. Now, people can say, oh, well, it's on the Game Boy Color. What do you expect? I played some amazing games on Game Boy. That's not an excuse for a shite game. The problem is, the game can softlock you so easily. And it happened to me. I got softlocked on this game. And the reason is because it gives you the ability to explore and then punishes you for that exploration because, oh, guess what? You shouldn't have explored. You should just follow it point to point to point, and I would have been absolutely fine. But as soon as you decide to go off the beaten path and, I don't know, find this keycard. What does this keycard that I found do? Let's go and find what it's for right now rather than wait until later on when I have to do something with it. And because of that, it meant that the items that I needed, they don't stay there across the game. They're there as you explore. So if you go through from A to B, so from one side of the map to the other, across that route you'll find items. Excellent. Then when you need to go from B to A again, with that keycard that you found earlier on, cool. New items and new enemies will be there waiting for you on that route. But if you go halfway to B and then decide, you know what, instead of going all the way to B, I'm just going to run back past A and go to that next objective, if you're following me with this, you'll skip all that repopulation of items because the game's memory can't handle that. So then when you go back, you've got more powerful enemies there again because they've respawned, and you don't have the stuff there. It's ridiculous. When it came to me fighting that final boss, I remember it clear as day. You have like 4 boss fights in a row. Quick succession. You know, the enemy's kind of mutating, he's evolving. Cool. Awesome. Great to see. Get into my first one. Totally stacked up with stuff. Thinking, no problem. Beat him. Next one comes along. Getting a little bit light now, but we're cool. I've still been pretty careful. The third one comes along. I just get through it. And I think, Jesus Christ, this was lucky. This was lucky as all hell. Thank God there isn't any more. You go out like 2 doors down the road. Boom. Last boss just appears. You think, oh, Jesus. And you can't beat him with a knife. You can't do what, like, you know, any other game in the series you can really do at this point, which is get good with a knife, right? No, it doesn't give you that option. Because what happens is, as you damage the enemy, he moves back. He moves back away from you. So you have to use guns. Bullshit. Absolutely bullshit. Now, I could do that game now, knowing what I know, and probably run through it and see it to the end, no problem at all. But the fact that the music is so grating, it's soul-destroyingly bad. The gameplay is trash. The setting is alright. You know, I quite like a ship. Playing as Barry, get some bonus points there. You could not pay me enough to go back and revisit this game. You couldn't. There is no way in hell. It is terrible. I will never play it ever again in my life. And because it's so bad, I'm giving it its own tier. We're leaving it like that. We're leaving it like that. Total trash. The worst game, spoiler alert for the rest of this video, the worst game in this list without a shadow of a doubt. Absolutely shockingly bad. A disgrace. Capcom, you should feel ashamed for yourself for even remotely teaming up and getting this game out there, because shocking. Moving on. So Dead Aim was a massive surprise to me. Like, you can see where I placed Survivor and Survivor 2. I was not having a good time at this point in the franchise, you know? In this run of videos, I was not enjoying myself whatsoever. And then to think, okay, right, well, let's buy Dead Aim, and it ended up costing me like £10, so I wasn't too happy about that. I was like, oh god, this game's going to be tragic, it's going to be really bad, I don't have a light gun, so it means I'm going to have a really bad experience with this, but we'll do it the best we can, you know, we'll just go into it, like I always try and do with any of these reviews. I go into it with, you know, kind of no expectation, really. No kind of prior judgment, or I try not to. There's some you know are going to be bad. You know, Umbrella Corps, I'm looking at you. But some you go into it and you think, I'm going to try and park that to the side. And Dead Aim actually ended up surprising me on all fronts. I really enjoyed it. It's short, like really short, and it's surprisingly easy. You get a stack of ammo all the time, and the enemies are totally brain dead, so you can just run past them. You can just sprint past hordes and hordes of the undead without too much concern. But it's got a really cool protagonist. I really like the virus that he undergoes and the transformation, getting electric powers into the T-virus. Genius idea. It just looks cool, and it's proper over the top as well. Like seeing the Chinese government just decide, you know what, we've had enough of this, and just instead of, I don't know, sending a missile in, or tactical missile, or a sniper team or something like that, they decide just to, you know, blam them down with a giant satellite. Cool, proper over the top. I really appreciate it, and you know, I really enjoyed it. I had a great time with it. I had a really, really great time. And so because of that, where do I want to put it? Is it better than 0? No. Is it better than 5? That's a hard one. That's a hard one, because with 5, you've got Wesker. Wesker just carries it so much. The whole plot with 5 is the best thing about it. Seeing, you know, all the lore that you get, finding out the origin of the progenitor flower and the virus, and Chris punching a boulder, Wesker just sitting in lava, in a volcano, shouting, Chris! You can't really get better than that. And 6, Jesus Christ, 6 ain't good. I'm going to put it there. It might change, but I'm going to put it there for the moment. The reason why 6 is worse is because it just goes on forever. It just doesn't end. By the time you've done Leon's campaign, and then maybe half of Chris, you've seen everything the game has. And yet, you've still got another campaign with Jake, which granted has a great boss fight at the end with Usanak. At Lava again. Lava's just the best in Resident Evil. But yeah, it just goes on too long. Whereas Dead Aim, it's a nice experience, nice, quick, arcadey fun, and it's the first kind of realization of how they could incorporate a light gun into Resident Evil, and it actually works. You know, it feels really good to play on a controller, let alone a light gun. It must be amazing. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I thought it was good. So even though I'm saying all this, you know, compared to the other entries, it ain't up there. But it's done pretty well. I mean, in the middle of D tier, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. So next up, we're moving on to one of the best games. We got Resident Evil Outbreak. Now, I played originally Resident Evil Outbreak on my PlayStation 2. Played it offline. I had a fantastic time with it. I loved it. I went in with good expectation, but I remember when I originally played it, I wasn't over the moon with it. I was so salty at the time when I was a kid, you know, with Capcom removing the online for PAL regions. I was not happy bunny about that. So when I got the chance to go back in and redo that now and see it through, I was completely blown away by it. It's a fantastic experience. From the start to the end, there isn't a duff chapter. Everything it does just screams to me as an old school Resident Evil fan. You know, you got the kind of classic control scheme. You've got, a dynamic camera rather than a fixed camera. But that works fine in Code Veronica, same kind of thing. The survivors are all cool. Sure, there's some issues with them, you know, in terms of their inter-party dynamics. I really just think that's kind of pointless. I know some people really like that, but it just does my head in. But playing it in an offline setting, it was still really fun and really quite challenging. The amount of times that I've gone back now since to play some more Outbreak and playing it online on my PC, been fantastic. But where should it live? I'm going to put it there. I absolutely adored it. And speaking of, File 2, I think it's even better. Now, I know some people will be going wild on that. I see a lot of people who seem to put them in separate tiers for some reason. I don't know why anyone would do that when they're essentially the same game. It's just DLC. You know, these days, it would just be a roadmap of content rather than it being a separate entry entirely. But I think it does some cool things. I think it does the environments that you go into in File 2 and how they can drastically change depending on what kind of way you set it up. So you think about the zoo, right? You can lock the elephant in place or not. And depending on if you do that, you'll get a totally different outcome. You know, you'll fight a lion instead of fighting the elephant. That's awesome. Let alone you add on to that, you've got then returning, or for the first time actually, going into the raccoon forest. That's a fantastic scenario. There really isn't a bad one. Even the subway, which granted is a bit of a pain in the arse, is still fun. And you get a cool boss fight at the end, even if there is just rolling cockroaches, you know, coming out of nowhere. I think it does what the first one does, just better. I think the environments are way more interesting than the first one. And sure, the first one's kind of more throwbacks to like RE2. And the first scenario in Outbreak File 1, being in the bar, is great. It's actually amazing. The first time we get to properly like explore Raccoon City. I prefer the zoo. I thought the zoo just sets up so many cool enemies, you know. I want some more exotic animals. I love sharks, for God's sake. I love the more kind of exotic we can get, you know. Further away we can move from it being just a crow and it being, you know, freaking Zazu flying out of nowhere and pecking your face off. That's a good time to me. That is a good time. Now, for the purpose of this, I do need to separate them in terms of having them one above the other. But when you look at it in across the entire list, I want you to kind of class it as just one kind of entry, alright? Because they are essentially two sides of the same game. Sure, there's minor changes to make it a better experience, especially when it comes to the kind of communication settings that the game had built into it. But it's not enough, really, to make a true distinction. I do prefer File 2 in terms of the scenarios it has there, but it's not enough to really separate them in any meaningful way. But yeah, coming in high, A tier. So that brings us to Umbrella Chronicles. Now, Umbrella Chronicles, when I bought that game on its release, I had it for my Wii, and it was just a perfect excuse to hang out with one of my buddies, drink a shed load of alcohol, and just have a right laugh on it. Play it in co-op. We did everything on the Wii. We did it on, you know, the hardest difficulty, getting the highest rankings. Just had a great time with it. And so when I knew that I'd be doing this full review at this point, I was really excited. And it lived up to it. I really enjoyed it. I had a phenomenal time with it. I mean, it's always nice going back through kind of familiar environments. Going back through the mansion, the training facility on Resident Evil 0. Going back through those is always a great time, and seeing Wesker's kind of story and what he was up to in the middle of those events, I really liked. I really liked the original plot, you know, especially towards the end of it after you've done everything, where you get Wesker's kind of final showdown. You get Jill and Chris storming the you know, the Arctic base or whatever. Loved all that. I thought it was excellent. Thought it was really, really good. The only downside with it is that it butchers one of my favourite games. It butchers RE3 and doesn't even bother with RE2. Now, I didn't know at the time when I did that review that all that was going to change when we got to Darkside Chronicles, because I'd never played Darkside before. But Jesus Christ, they fumbled the bag with that so much. I don't know why they didn't just take the extra time and maybe give them the extra budget they needed to be able to make environments their own and to be able to really, you know, give us the clock tower again. It's just little things like that that would have made a massive difference. The disposal facility in Resident Evil 3. Give us that again. I don't know, give us some live selection. Give us something to really make it feel like Resident Evil 3, where all it was really was just Outbreak with Jill and Carlos slapped on there. And then a final confrontation with Nemesis, which, granted, is cool on top of the RPD. But I could have done with so much more. You know, I really wanted more. And especially as how much they got out of Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 0 in that game. I expected the same, and we just didn't get it. Now, obviously, it was budgeting issues, that was the main reason, but that doesn't excuse it, you know? You can't really sit there and say, oh, well, I'm going to let it slide because Capcom didn't give them the budget they need. That's not my problem. My viewpoint is that I'm treating it as a product just like anything else. Regardless to what issues the team have, regardless to what production budget they were allowed to spend, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you're giving this much kind of love and these many files and pickups and everything for us, the fans, and this is really like a kind of celebration for the fans in a way, why not either spend the money and get it done properly, or just skip it entirely? That would have been the most sensible option. Skip Resident Evil 2 and 3 and just move on. But maybe they thought there wasn't enough there. You could have just done some more with Rebecca. You know, what the hell is she up to? I don't know, just chuck her in somewhere else. Just chuck her in. No. Let's just rip off Resident Evil 3 just so we can say we got the original. It's not even the trilogy, is it? It's just 0, 1, and 3. Good one. So, where does that leave us? Where am I going to put it? I think for what it is, which is just an arcade shooter, a light gun game, it's really nice to play. It's really fun to play. You know, chaining headshots together is excellent. I really like how it feels to play, even this many years on. It's excellent. I played it on the PlayStation 3 with the Move controllers. I had a fantastic time. You know, I'd encourage anyone to pick this up and play it, especially, you know, if you can get it on the cheap and just sit back, you know, crack a couple of cans and just have a great time with it. Why not? There's certainly worse ways to spend your time, that's for damn sure. Now, is it better than Zero? Probably not. For the one big flaw that Zero has, which is of course not having an item box. Just mind-blowing. What a stupid idea. It's still a fun game to play, and it does at least flesh out more of the story, even if then it does kind of turn some of the events of Resident Evil 1 into a bit of a, huh? What? Why is she acting like that? You know, specifically with the fact that she's killed, I don't know, 15 hunters by now, and she sees one in the mansion and she just falls over and pees her pants. It makes no sense, right? But, taking that aside, it's still an interesting game, at the very least. Yeah. Sure, I'm going to bang it there. I don't think it really deserves to be any higher than that. And I think that's pretty good, you know, I'm giving that quite a bit of praise there. For it to be above Resident Evil 5. And it's a better game than Dead Aim. It takes what Dead Aim does, and sure, it only provides one kind of interesting plot, I suppose. But it's fun to play. It's just knows what it is, and it's fun because of that. Dark Side Chronicles. Good God. Now this is the one that I imagine I'm going to get some shit for. Because I had some shit when I put Resident Evil 4 where it is on my last tier list. But this is the one that Dark Side, on paper, is a much better game than Umbrella Chronicles. It is. But it just fails in execution. So what does it do right? It's got a better story. It's actually got a unique story. It's got way better production value. The graphics are incredible. Really, really good. The scope and the scale is brilliant, and the way they tell the interweave story between what Leon's been up to and his past experiences, you know, with Resident Evil 2, and then kind of having that alongside what's actually happening at the time, you know, in Operation Javier. That's fantastic. I think all the characters in there, Manuela, she's great. You know, getting to see what happens to Krauser and his kind of in a Vegeta style monologue where he's talking about this power, it could be mine. I really enjoyed all that. It's proper campy, but I like that in Resident Evil. The story with her mother, you know, being like a crazy monster was interesting. And hell, I love the Code Veronica virus. I think it's the best virus out of the entire series. Any virus that you can have that gives you like fire powers? Hell, sign me up. That's a great time. And seeing that cutscene where she just melts, you know, her father's like mutated body. Yeah. Oh, sign me up, boys. That's cool. The only problem is the game plays like shit. I got motion sickness from the moment I played it until I finished with it. It was horrible to play. And really frustrating as well. The bosses, when I was saying about her mother, that boss fight in that little tiny like lab building, just where you find out that she's, you know, just receiving organs from little kids that are being nicked off the street. That boss fight when you have with her mother there is just the worst thing in the world. It's solid. So hard. Took me so many attempts to get by it. And it's not like as if I think, oh, well, it was hard, so I'm gonna, you know, shit on it. No. It wasn't that I felt like my skill got any better. I just got lucky with shots. Because you've got a gun. And, you know, normally, I don't know, you'd imagine that you'd expect it to be a kind of a static camera or hardly any movement. In this, it was like this. You just don't know what the hell's going on. You can't see anything. Ever. Literally nothing. Like, what the hell? You got one job. If you're going to be an arcade shooter, be an arcade shooter. You don't see House of the Dead going all mental. Like, woo! Who does that serve? Sure, you can say, oh, it's more action-packed, it's more visceral. Cool. I can't play it. So as such, even though on paper it's a better game in every single way, it's going there, down there. In fact, it's going there. Because, yes, it's got higher highs than Dead Aim, but it plays worse. And ultimately, it's not a movie. You know, I'm not watching the gameplay, I'm having to experience it. And it was so frustrating. So frustrating to play. If they had just taken that one design philosophy, instead of making it immersive, just make it be what it is. An arcade game, an arcade shooter, a light gun game, it would be way higher up on the list. It'd be probably approaching B level. It would have the same kind of base gameplay that I have with Umbrella Chronicles, so it would immediately put it there, but it's got a way better story, so it would be in B. Maybe top of C tier. But even so, it's something that never happened. So, we got what we got. We got a game that doesn't want you to play it, because it's just horrendous to play. So we're getting near the end of this now. We've got Operation Raccoon City, Umbrella Corps, and then RE1 and 2 to go. Wow, what a juxtaposition that is. You got two games that tried to move away from the Resident Evil formula as much as possible, and then we got the two OGs. So we got Operation Raccoon City. Now this is a game that when I was going into the review phase, I wasn't looking forward to it at all. I thought I hadn't even played this game. I couldn't find my PS3 games for some reason. I just don't know where they are. They're upstairs somewhere. They're in my attic and I just can't find them. So I ended up buying it again, put it in, and then when it loaded up a save file that was on my PlayStation 3 hard drive, I was shocked. And that's when I looked at the trophies, and that's when I realized that all this experience I'd had with the game is there, but when, I have no idea, right? As I've said, going into this I wasn't expecting great things, but it turns out it was actually really fun. It was a surprisingly fun game. With a team of people going through this, you know, like an actual getting a group together and going in, this game would be a hell of a lot of fun. The story itself is proper throwaway. Go in, destroy some documents, destroy stuff that links anything that's happening in Raccoon City to Umbrella itself. Cool premise. The execution on that's pretty lame, to be honest. You know, you get from one objective to another and then you say, oh, thanks for destroying those files. By the way, you need to go and do this before then we let you home. So why didn't the team just say, do you know what, just, no, we're done. We're done. And you do kind of get that choice towards the end, because you do have this cool moment where you meet up with Leon and Claire. You get a choice then of, you know, executing Leon or not. And depending on what your choices are, your team will then split into those choices for a final climactic battle. And that is cool. That is awesome. I gotta say, I really enjoyed that. But it doesn't really save it. The crazy thing is, this game is still mega active, which I was totally shocked by. I found people dropping in and out of my game all the time. I found that I was able to get into a multiplayer match without any waiting. You know, I'd be just straight into it. I just couldn't understand that. On a PlayStation 3, on PC you might think, yeah, okay, fair enough. You know, it's quite easy to go back and play old games on that. But digging out a console with now, which is 2 consoles ago, wild. Where's it going to live? The problem is, it is a fun game, right? Is it better than Resident Evil 5? Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to go there. I'm not sure why it's there, to be honest with you. I'm not sure why. It just feels right. I can feel it in my balls, and it just feels right there. If I go any higher... Oh, man. Do you know what? We're going wild with it. Yeah, we're doing it. I don't think it's fair, really, for Umbrella Chronicles to be that much higher than Darkside. Sure, Darkside isn't playable. People are going to be angry. They're going to be so angry. But I don't care. This is my opinion. Don't have to vibe with this. Yeah. Yeah, do you know what? Let's go for it. Let's go for it. It's a fun game. Speaking of fun games. Umbrella Corps. In complete opposite fashion to Operation Raccoon City, this game is unplayable. Physically unplayable. There is nobody online. On Steam charts, I think in my review I said it was like 2 people. PlayStation 4 version, which I played, which, you know, is on sale now pretty much like every other week for like £1.73. Do not waste your money on it, because it will be you and that is it online. I don't know why Capcom are paying to keep these servers up. I really don't, because there is literally no reason for them to do so. Now, what I played with my fellow podcast host Spencer, I really enjoyed. The movement's really slick. The shooting is okay. You know, it's not exactly engaging in any way, but it's not bad. It works, which is something, right? And the 4 survivors game mode, I think that's what it's called. You're in like a 4-way match. We played 1v1. And you kill enemies and you kill each other and you rack up points. And then you need to then bank those points then at a typewriter and drop those off. That was fantastic. That one mode saves this game from being a total trash fire, because that was excellent. Now, I managed to play 1 game of online, actual proper online, and it was against a load of boosters. And it was alright. It was okay. Nothing particularly enjoyable about it. It was just fine. The issue is, if you buy this game, if you actually did spend £1.79 and waste your money on it just to see how bad it is, the issue you've got is that the single player content is terrible. Single player content is you playing offline against bots, but there's no actual bots. It's just enemies from the main series just there. There's no other humans. There's no other, you know, UBCS agents coming after you like there is in the multiplayer. It's just a little tiny arena, which, granted, has been redone to a high level. You know, seeing the Spencer Mansion again, seeing some of the areas from Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6 redone. They're cool, and I really did enjoy those. Seeing the outside of the RPD, excellent. But it's just lifeless. It's just devoid of any... It feels like an executive literally said, right, this esport thing, it's getting quite big. I reckon we should throw our hat in the ring, boys. What IPs we got? I'm like, oh, Monster Hunter doesn't really suit this. We got anything with guns? Oh, can't use Phoenix Wright. We could use Mega Man, but you know, we don't ever want to acknowledge Mega Man ever again. So let's do Resident Evil. There's guns in Resident Evil. Excellent. Good work, Larry. And that was it. And they said, yeah, just piss it in, just put it in. But that one mode does save it, though. That one mode is actually fun. It's actually something that, if Spence turned around to me and he said, do you know what? I want to play that 4 Survivors or whatever it's called again, I wouldn't say no. And so because of that, I'm going to put it there. If that one mode wasn't there, it would be down here. It would be down here with Gaiden. Make no mistake about it. That one mode saves its ass so much. Okay, the final 2 entries. Resident Evil 1. Now, I could have a graphic on here for Resident Evil 1 and Director's Cut, because in my review, I played it, the original Resident Evil 1 first, and then did the Arrange mode, which is the Director's Cut content, afterwards. So I could do, but for the sake of this, I'm just going to class it as just Resident Evil 1, and I'll include my rationale into this as part of the director's cut as well. So just think of it kind of as director's cut. It's definitely up here, isn't it? So up here somewhere, A or S. I got Resident Evil Remake there. Resident Evil Remake does what Resident Evil 1 does and just does it better. Well, it does it the best. You know, it takes what was there as a basic experience and elevates it. Resident Evil 1's iconic, and it started the whole thing off. As such, it does earn a lot of credence from that. But when you're comparing it amongst the peers that it did spawn thereafter, it is lacking. It's lacking in quite a number of ways. It's really simple in its mechanics. There isn't really anything too crazy about it. And actually, surprisingly, Resident Evil 1 doesn't have that many puzzles, which is wild to think about. Think about how many are in Remake. You know, they're out the wazoo. But in the original, there's not actually that many. Now, the arrange mode was phenomenal. It was an absolute blast. I loved it. I loved it so, so much. Is it better than Resident Evil 3? No. I prefer Resident Evil 3 over the original. I did at the time, and I do now. Even with the arrange mode, which was phenomenal. I'm going to put it here. I'm going to put it there, which is still really high. You know, top 5. Learning from what this game did really well. I think the rest of these games here above it just did it just that much better. It does feel dirty putting it there. Yeah, Joe, I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to stick with it for now. Because I'm going to look over this in just a moment. But here we go, the final. Resident Evil 2. So again, it's got to be in the top 2 rows, doesn't it? But where does it live? Now, in the review that I'd only just put up a couple of weeks ago, I stated in there that Resident Evil 2 I really hadn't experienced before. So it was like a brand new, fresh experience, you know, coming into it without nostalgia clouding me, without what I see with Resident Evil Remake and what I see with, you know, RE3 original. I don't get that clouded vision there. I got just clarity. And what it did was it took my clarity and blew my fucking mind. Resident Evil 2 is an absolute masterpiece. It's phenomenal. Is it better than Resident Evil 3 Nemesis? Yes. Yes, it is. The reason for that is that it adds a lot of extra content in there in terms of the zapping system. It's a really, really good plot. It fleshes out the entire world. It takes Resident Evil, what was built up here in this entry here, and just explodes it. Just totally opens the can of worms. Just, wow, just go crazy, live, go free, crawl around. It just goes mental with how much it just blows everything up into making it better and bigger. And it just works. It just works on every single level. The only issue I had in that review was that it was too easy. Now, I know that I could just play the Dreamcast version, which apparently is rock hard, and that would solve that issue for me. So I'm not actually going to count that against this in terms of its ranking, because I've got... If Resident Evil 1 was just Resident Evil 1 with that director's cut element, I'd probably chuck it further on down the list. It would probably be behind Code Veronica. So it's not fair for me to then say that Resident Evil 2 is too easy when I could just play a Dreamcast version. Because all I need them to do, really, is just limit my ammo. So we've established that it's better than Resident Evil 3. But is Resident Evil 2 better than Resident Evil Remake? No. I don't think anything ever will be, for me, personally. For me, Resident Evil Remake is just the perfect survival horror game. It just epitomizes everything I look for in survival horror. And just does everything the first one did so well. And all the lessons they learned from, you know, Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, and Code Veronica, and just crystallizes that into a game which is far superior than everything that came before, and everything that came after in my mind. So we know it's not better than this, but is it better than Remake? Is it better than RE2 Remake? Now let's think about the differences here. Resident Evil 2 Remake is a scarier game in every single way. Mr. X's inclusion into RE2 Remake and making him a kind of a focal point of the game was really clever. The whole way he patrols the RPD to track you down, and all you hear is just gung, 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 gung from footsteps, is terrifying. When you combine that with the lickers and how they've taken what was there as the base for Resident Evil 2, the OG, and just upped that, you know, just making it so they're even more scary than they were before, and really making it so it's all about sound. Sound is so important in RE2 Remake. The issue with RE2 Remake is that it's not replayable. Not in the same way that the original is. The original, with the zapping system, gives you choice. And choice to me is what I love about Resident Evil. I love having the ability for things to really bite you on the arse, and for that to be quite clearly told to you, so that you know that you're making a conscious decision to do something. And I think that with the original RE2, there's just more care put into the player experience than there is in the remake. The remake is a phenomenal game, but for me, I think the original is a better game. You've got 4 different ways that your campaign can go, let alone all the extra modes and everything else that you have with it, compared to Resident Evil 2 Remake, which gives you, you know, one clear path, really. Whoever has the second scenario just gets shit out of luck, really. It's kind of just a bit pointless. And the problem is with RE2 Remake is that the first part of the game is by far the best. You know, you move onwards and you go into the lab. There just really isn't the same kind of dynamic that you have in the RPD with Mr. X. He really just elevates that game to another height. Whereas in RE2, the original, I find it just paced really, really well. So my top 5 Resident Evil games. Resident Evil Remake, coming in at number 1. Resident Evil 2, the original, coming in at number 2. Resident Evil 2 Remake, coming in at number 3. Number 4, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. And number 5, Resident Evil 7. But you can see on that A tier is quite a long tier. And I think the difference between like Resident Evil 7 and Rev 2 in that tier isn't huge. You know, there isn't a mountain between those two, otherwise I'd have put them in separate tiers. I think when you go in from A to B, that's when there is definitely a step down, and then that's just all the way down, you know, throughout the rest of the tier list. And so, that is it. That is my definitive tier list on Resident Evil. But what's next for the channel is up to you. Down below, in the pinned comment and in the description, is a poll, which will be closing a week from this video's live date. As it currently stands, it's a tie between The Evil Within and Devil May Cry. It's completely up to you which one we do, and I am excited to get to either of them. Thank you for joining me on this journey through all the Resident Evil games, and I will be back to this series when we get Resident Evil 3 Remake. We get the next gen edition, I will cover that, because I feel that my original review wasn't quite up to snuff. It was before I knew what I was really doing with the channel. So I will be going back to that in a couple of months' time and delivering that for you, a full updated review. And I will be going into, whenever we get DLC or whenever we get RE-verse, if that ever happens, I will be covering future games in the series, of course. But that is it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed listening to my ramblings. As you can tell, this isn't scripted. We've just gone for it. And if you have, make sure to put a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. It all helps me grow and find a larger audience. I do appreciate every single one of you. Now, I do want to hear your tier lists, so make sure to comment below, and I try and respond to every single person on my channel. So I look forward to seeing how much you disagree with me. And remember, this is just one man's take. So your opinion is just as valid as mine, and I'll look forward to seeing how much you slag me off for my tier list in the comments. But thank you for your time, and take care of yourselves, take care of each other. See ya.